Okay, we should be good now. Go to the one voice page over
there. Okay.
Go here. Check on my phone. Okay, we should be good to go.
Okay, just make sure people can see it. Get started in just a minute, y'all.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. Something was going on with the NAACP page, so I had to start it from the One Voice page.
It's on the One Voice page?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and we're live now, so you guys can go ahead.
Okay, sorry about that, everybody. We had some technical difficulties getting this conversation started on the Mississippi NAACP Facebook page. So we'll go ahead and get started. We're glad everybody could join us today for part one of our criminal justice conversation. And we have two very special guests with us today. Our first guest is Miss Pauline Rogers. She is the president and CEO of the REACH Foundation, which stands for Reaching and Educating for Community Hope. She operates the Wendy Hatcher Transitional Home for recently incarcerated people. And she also runs a statewide employment and skills initiative known as MORE, which stands for Mississippi Offender Reentry Establishment. And the reentry program that she runs with her husband has a 0% recidivism rate, which means that the people that transition in and out of this program, the people that complete her reentry programs, do not reoffend. And so we're glad to have Miss Pauline here with us today. She is a tireless advocate for prison reform and criminal justice reform in the state. And we partnered with her earlier this year on a letter writing campaign to incarcerated people across the state. So some of our youth and college chapters and some of our members participated and wrote letters. So we want to thank Ms. Pauline. It was a privilege for being a part of that initiative to write incarcerated people across the state. Our next guest is State Senator Derek Simmons. He represents District 12, which is in Bolivar, Coahoma, and Washington County. Those are counties in the Delta. And he serves as chairman of the Mississippi Senate Democratic Caucus. And he sits on two very important criminal justice committees in the state Senate, Corrections and Judiciary B. And Senator Simmons, since he has been a state senator since 2011, is that correct, Senator Simmons?
That's correct.
He has displayed a very strong record on progressive criminal justice issues, and I met him 2 years ago when I started to work at the Capitol. So we're glad to have both of them here today. Our conversation today will be around 4 topics. And so each guest will discuss each topic. And after they're done with their dialogue, we'll open it up for a question and answer session. So if you have any questions about any of these 4 topics, you can ask it in the comment section, and we'll make sure that each guest can see those questions and that they can respond to those questions. But our first topic for today is about the recent appointment of Burl Cain. He was recently appointed by Governor Tate Reeves as the new commissioner of MDOC, the Mississippi Department of Corrections. And he previously served as the warden of Angola State Prison, which is in Louisiana, and it's the largest and one of the most notorious state prisons in the country. And he resigned from that post in 2016 when allegations surfaced about some of his business transactions. So the question to both of our guests, what does his appointment mean for the future of MDOC and the treatment of incarcerated persons? And we'll start with you, Ms. Rogers.
Good afternoon. Glad to be here. Thankful to the NAACP, to One Voice, and to you, Matthew, for putting this all together, and definitely thank you and appreciate the work with the Freedom Riders campaign. Our first position is to always be prayerful of all MDOC positions because it takes teamwork and everything, and MDOC is no exception. Secondly, I'm hopeful in every situation. And lastly, we will always be watchful of anybody in corrections because that's the population we serve. Kane's appointment, in my position and opinion, is another indication and reflection on what has not been done with MDOC in the standing still position of the present leadership in corrections, because since December, we've been in the national spotlight and nothing has been done in good faith to show that we want to end mass incarceration in inhumane conditions within our state. And Burl Kane, having accepted that position, amid, I don't know if he was given all the information about nothing having been done. So I don't know how much freedom he will be allowed to have, or if it's just going to be another part of the systems that are never corrected. And one thing that comes to mind when you talk about Burl Kane for me is I'm currently working on a campaign to free a lady from his former state of Louisiana, the longest incarcerated female woman, African-American woman, been incarcerated over 50 calendar years for robbing a store with a toy gun, Gloria Jean Williams. The slogan campaign is Free Mama Glow. They actually had a Glow campaign in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So I'm just wondering the injustice with this lady. There were 3 co-defendants in her case. 2 of those co-defendants died in prison that actually were trigger people in the person's death. The 3rd person worked at the governor's mansion in 1983. That person got out in 1983. She is the only person associated with that case that did not pull a trigger, had a toy gun, that just got out of the hospital recently for COVID-19 and was sent back to the highest positive COVID-19 cases in the prison. So I'm just wondering what Burl Kane, he didn't do anything on that latest, but I'm hopeful amid all else that with watchful people like Senator Simmons and others, that we will get somewhere. So we shall see.
Thank you, Ms. Pauline. And so it's on you, Senator Simmons.
Thank you, Matthew, and thank you, One Voice and NAACP and all of those policy makers out there and all of those advocates like you, Ms. Pauline, and all of your listeners who support second chances, and all of those out there who believe that those who are incarcerated are our neighbors and will return to our community. As it relates to Burl Kane, as you stated, Matthew, Burl Kane, he's a well-known and controversial prison official who implemented a wide range of programs for inmates at the infamous Angola prison in Louisiana. And some of those programs were a rodeo, radio station, seminary classes, public speaking group, job training, Bible studies. And it's important to note that the violent crime at Angola decreased during his tenure, and many inmates claim that their quality of life improved dramatically when Kane arrived. But it's also important, or as important, to know that the bar was extremely low when Kane became the commissioner, because Angola was known as one of the most miserable places on earth. Kane is applauded by some as Angola, an Angola person who's an outside of the box thinker, who believes in rehabilitation and imposes a strong sense of morality through religious practices and provides genuine opportunities for growth. However, others see Kane as a 78-year-old relic of the past whose style is paternalistic and in some instances very, very harsh. So he was accused of corruption involving inmate labor and shady business deals, and he resigned under this shadow in Louisiana. And so I know a lot of our folks here in Mississippi, they know
that considering what we are dealing with regarding misappropriation and misuse of funds at one of our other state agencies, it was very interesting to have someone who has basically are under the same type of allegations in another state to come over to run one of our agencies here in the state of Mississippi. The truth is this: we know that Mississippi Department of Corrections, it needs reform. We don't know what Kane could do here in Mississippi, but we do know that without successful legislation that will speak to reducing the prison population, we know if we don't have successful legislation that speaks to changing parole eligibility and sentencing reform, we know if we don't have successful legislation that speaks to reentry programs that will help people to reintegrate into society, when we know that 97% of those incarcerated will return back to our communities. We know if we don't have comprehensive programs like diversion programs like drug courts, mental health courts, veteran courts, it doesn't matter who is the head of MDOC. If we don't actually change our laws to provide all of these things, then it doesn't matter if Kane comes here with rodeos and radio stations and Bible studies, he will fail. He will fail just like our previous commissioner who was working hard, coming to that legislature, Matthew and Miss Pauline and all the listeners out there, begging time and time and time again for all of the reforms, all of the support regarding understaffing. And every time our former commissioner came to that legislature, the then lieutenant governor and now governor denied all of her requests. And so what we saw happen that came to a head in December of 2019, and what we have been dealing with over the last quarter of this year, those were just waiting to happen because we did not put or give that commissioner the tools that she had desperately asked for to help make corrections better in the state of Mississippi. And the same will happen to Kane if we don't do what we need to do in the legislature.
And I'm glad you brought that up, Senator Simmons, because the last thing we need are more punitive practices and policies, because we know that does nothing, that doesn't help us get to the root cause of a lot of the conditions that exist inside of our state prison system. So thank you for sharing that insight, and thank you, Ms. Rogers, for sharing some of those words as well. And so our next topic, we know that measures have been put in place to protect the general public from COVID-19, to slow the spread of COVID-19. But it's pretty much impossible for incarcerated people to practice social distancing. We know from previous reports that some live in unsanitary conditions, and some have pre-existing or existing health problems that increases the likelihood that they'll contract COVID-19. So has the state, do you think the state has implemented measures since the rise of this pandemic to prevent the spread of COVID-19 inside state prisons? And if not, what are some measures that you think should be implemented now that we have a new commissioner and now that the legislature has reconvened? And you can go ahead, Senator Simmons.
Okay. All right. So there has been significant litigation around the issue, Matthew. Currently, the Mississippi Center for Justice, the ACLU of Mississippi, the MacArthur Justice Center at the University Law School are litigating a case in federal court challenging MDOC's alleged failure to take appropriate infection prevention measures at CMCF and SMCI. MacArthur, the Center for Constitutional Rights, and others also are litigating the conditions at the ICE detention facility in Natchez. So first and foremost, we know that MDOC and ICE are conducting very few tests of our inmates. MDOC boasts about the low number of confirmed cases in Mississippi prisons, but they have performed less than 70 tests.
Wow.
Again, they have performed less than 70 tests regarding COVID-19 And currently we have about 18,132 inmates in our facilities. And that is less than 1/2 of 1% of those inmates who have been tested. MDOC has taken some steps to prevent infection. They frequently clean. They are straining the guards and outside visitors. They are refusing to transport county inmates into the state facilities. But we could do much better. We can do a whole lot more, though, as far as the cleaning regimens. We can clean more, multiple times a day. As far as the mask usage by guards and inmates, we can improve on that. The immediate access to healthcare for those inmates complaining of symptoms, we can address those concerns, because as I understand it, even though inmates claim that they are having symptoms, they are not being tested, since we've only tested about 70. The appropriate isolation of those sick inmates from those other inmates, we can do a better job with that. Also, inmate access to cleaning supplies and PPEs and the appropriate staffing regarding proactive monitoring of the inmate health. People in prison are sitting ducks. If we have an outbreak in our Mississippi prisons, and we have seen the effect of outbreaks in other prison facilities across the country, it is going to be deadly. And so what we need to do is to be very, very mindful and proactive. And in all of these groups, including myself as the Senate Minority Leader, we wrote letters to the governor as early as March and April saying we need to address the fact that our inmates are basically sitting in these facilities and they cannot practice social distancing. They cannot do the things that we are able to do in the free world. So it's almost like that cruise ship that we had the outbreak on, but in our correctional facilities, Matthew, it's like a cruise ship on steroids. If we have an outbreak, we will not be able to actually sustain our healthcare system. We have limited ICU beds, we have limited ventilators, and we could overwhelm the system. And my last point is we must accept the fact, the governor, lieutenant governor, the speaker, legislators, Mississippians, we must accept the fact that what we are dealing with in corrections is just not a criminal justice issue. It is a public health issue.
Thank you, Senator Simmons. Ms. Pauline.
Absolutely. My perspective, I am formerly incarcerated. My perspective is a little bit different. And the measures that MDOC is telling anyone that they put in place to slow the spread of COVID-19 is a joke. It looks good on paper. It sounds good. When it's handed down to the legislators, when they sit there, it sounds good. It looks real good on paper. But there are no such things in essence. And they may have allowed a few masks to go in. But if the state has spent money on masks, as a formerly incarcerated person, that was a waste. Trust me. The inmate population will do whatever is necessary to be as protective as they can be, if that means cutting up DOC clothing property. They had masks, whether the first mask was taken in there or not. And when it comes to, in fact, the prison population is making masks sending to the public in their forget-me-not sewing class. I just donated 2 sewing machines on yesterday, additional sewing machines. So the inmate population have greater access. And
so they aren't
before the term
from the products that they're producing.
Out of the products they're producing. Shelter in place is a new term amid this COVID-19. But shelter in place is what the prison is, and will always be shelter in place. And the only social distancing is in MDOC is solitary confinement. Those in solitary confinement or in essence, the only one that are distanced from the other population, and that is statewide about 1,600 beds, and that was stats from uh, years ago. But unless DOC can renovate or has renovated 100% of the facilities to make solitary confinement, then the spread of COVID-19 is inevitable. And it's like Senator Simmons was saying, the testing has been a joke. We transitioned a lady April the 7th. And as of April the 7th, I know firsthand that they had just gotten their full bar of soap, and it was dial soap, in quite some years, a few years. They've not had a full bar of soap.
Wow.
As of April the 27th, they still had no paper towel and no soap in the general bathroom. That same one bar of soap that was issued to the population, they had to use it when they went to the restroom for a general population. Oh, so that was zero. And the budget was already cut on the basic needs before COVID-19. Former Commissioner Hall could not get that funding. And so COVID-19 has required all of us to increase spending in areas to have just some of the basic cleaning, hygiene issues. And MDOC was already short of that prior to going in. So the spread of COVID-19 is inevitable. And I think that it is going to be the proponent that will probably end mass incarceration in a manner in which the advocates like us who are on this line have not advocated for. We didn't advocate for death. We advocated for freedom of some. Right. But with the untreatment of COVID-19 and the lack of testing, we may get an end to mass incarceration by way of the death penalty for most.
So Senator Simmons, can you clarify for the audience whether or not Burl Cain has started yet, and what are some of the things that he can do now as commissioner? What are some of the things that he can do? Can he come before the legislative body and say, hey, these are some of the things that we need now inside of MDOC? And is it within the legislature's power to move swiftly to kind of remedy some of those problems that we currently see inside of MDOC to make sure that we keep incarcerated people safe during this time?
Well, as it relates to the process, once the governor named him, Matthew, the Senate constitutionally has to advise and consent. That's all with all agency heads that are named by the governor. So at this point, the Senate Correction Committee has not brought his nomination up for the committee to approve the nomination. If he is approved through the Senate Corrections Committee, which I sit on, then it goes to the full Senate floor, and then the full Senate floor, which has 52 senators, gets an opportunity to vote on whether or not he should be confirmed. If he's confirmed, then he can start working as our commissioner. I mean, we just have an overcrowded problem. We have an understaffing problem, and we had all of these problems even before COVID-19. Mm-hmm. So without sentencing reform, without parole eligibility reform, and to reduce the prison population, and what Ms. Pauline has been very eloquently saying as trying to end mass incarceration, if we don't do those things, then it's COVID-19 today, but it could be something else tomorrow. Sure. So we just have to focus on stopping people from going into the jails altogether, but by having these programs outside of corrections and creating alternatives for incarceration. But at the same time, for our brothers and sisters who have made mistakes and who are serving time, we need to create situations where we can have parole eligibility and give them hope of release, and then we'll have a different behavior inside of the system as well. So regarding COVID-19, we just need to do the right thing. We're not testing. We're certainly not testing. And so every time you hear these daily reports about about COVID-19 in the state of Mississippi. And if you hear anything as it relates to MDOC, like Ms. Pauline say, it's a joke. To test 70 people, I mean, out of over 18,000 people, and to boast and say that our numbers are this and our positive numbers and our negative numbers are, we're not testing. I mean, and so the unknown is what the community should be afraid of, because to the extent there are more people who are in fact positive and they are released over the next year or so, they are coming back into our community. So we need to do everything we can to treat those individuals, those Mississippians that are in our correctional facilities as the humans that they are.
Right.
Thank you, Senator.
I want to add one thing to that. The things that have been put in place for the prison to deal with COVID-19 is not dealing with COVID-19, but it's further punitive treatment on the prisoner. The visitation takeaway when you've not put a Zoom process or something in place to offset what you haven't given a positive for a negative. You're taking it away, but you didn't put something back in place to keep down the violence and the stress, because these are people who are concerned about their safety and well-being, but they're also concerned about the safety and well-being of their children, their mother, grandmother, granddaddy, and their families on the outside. Then you stop the transport of care, which means that prisoner that already needed health care prior to COVID-19 can now no longer be transported to get the medical attention that was already lacking prior to COVID-19. So it's just and then COVID-19 was already existing before. The scientists say that this is not, COVID-19 coronavirus is not new. This is a new strain. So not treating those prison populations for whatever the strain we're currently deal with, they can be released and get in contact with somebody asymptomatic or symptomatic, and we be in a crisis worse than the one we're in now, with more than, because we already over 100,000 deaths in this country.
That's right.
Well, Ms. Pauline, we have people in the system, and Matthew, who were prior to COVID-19 hitting, they were sentenced to non-violent property or non-violent drug crimes. And by virtue of being in our correctional facilities right now, it's almost like their sentence is death.
Yeah.
Right.
Because if they catch COVID-19 at the rate that we are testing and at the rate that we are falsely reporting what's really going on in MDOC, in my opinion, they could basically die in our correctional facilities, even though they actually are in for some non-violent, low-level crime.
Yep.
And that's a shame.
And I know that you've introduced in the past some reclassification bills. So non-violent offenders that are currently incarcerated, that have been convicted under some felony drug offense law, those folks would be resentenced to a misdemeanor under that reclassification bill, which kind of leads to our next topic. Are there any bills currently, now that the legislature has reconvened, are there any bills currently on the calendar that you think are good criminal justice bills that you think could possibly be a panacea for some of the problems that we see inside of our state prison system or our criminal justice system as a whole? Because I know before the legislature suspended, one of the bills that was on the calendar was this ban the box bill, which would make it easier for folks that have been convicted of a crime to get a job. And we know bills like that are needed more than ever now that we've seen a surge in unemployment because of this pandemic. So can you talk a little bit about some of the bills that are currently on the calendar that might be good criminal justice bills? And can you also talk about whether or not you think the legislature should allocate COVID-19 relief funds that the state received from the federal government to improving conditions inside our prison system?
Okay, thank you, Matthew. So there are a number of very important criminal justice bills that are going through the legislative process. The most significant is House Bill 1377, which safely reduces the population of our overcrowded prisons by restoring parole eligibility to approximately 10,000 people who are currently ineligible for parole due to some of our ill-advised 1990 era amendments to the parole statute. Senate Bill 2123, which I sponsored, is similar to House Bill 1377, but is not as effective as House Bill 1377. Where Senate Bill 2123, it was changed through amendment. So Senate Bill 2123 was as effective as 1377, but of course, through the legislative process, the bills, they changed from their original form. So the current form of Senate Bill 2123 makes serious offenders eligible after 50% of their sentences, but House Bill 1377 makes them eligible after 50% or 20 years, whichever is less. So that makes House Bill 1377 currently better than Senate Bill 2123. It also guarantees that every parole eligible person has their first parole hearing within a reasonable time. We have a lot of people inside right now, they're not even granted parole hearings. Unlike Senate Bill 2123, House Bill 1377 also ensures that all juveniles are eligible for parole no later than 20 years into their sentence. So if you were a juvenile or you are a juvenile serving time, House Bill 1377, Matthew, ensures that you will get a parole hearing no later than 20 years. House Bill 1024, it places important limitations on the use of habitual offenders enhancements, including requiring that the third offense under the big habitual be a violent crime, and thus ending the practice of imposing life without parole for non-violent crimes. Senate Bill 2464 is the last one I'll talk about. It dramatically expands the number of people who are eligible to earn sentence reduction through good behavior and participation in programs, and thus it incentivizes good behavior and also encourages the offenders to participate in programs while they are serving their time. As far as the legislature using the COVID-19 funds, to your listeners out there and to the viewers out there, we had about $1.25 billion that we are considering now that came into the state of Mississippi regarding COVID-19 federal funds. The first 25% of those funds, $300 million, we spent for small businesses. So we have about $900 million that's left. I'm not really sure about the Treasury regulations about sending direct money to MDOC as an agency, but certainly any COVID-related things, like whether it's PPEs, whether it's to help clean and keep the place sanitized, to me, that sounds like that would be in compliance, in line with the Treasury regulations, and that to the extent that that's okay through the Treasury regulations, we can use some of those COVID-19 money or those federal dollars in corrections. But I will still say that the best way to address what we are dealing with in MDOC is to safely reduce the prison population through sentencing reforms and through changing the laws regarding parole eligibility.
Thank you, Senator Simmons. And we have one last question for you, Miss Pauline. Can you describe some of the advocacy and service work your organization has been involved in since the outbreak of COVID-19, and just some of the work that you've been involved with in general, and how the community can support some of your efforts?
Well, the one I put at the top of the list, since Senator Simmons has been talking about bills, on April the 7th, amid this COVID-19 pandemic, we picked up a lady from prison, from out of state, no MDOC badge, and ran into and then we're in a pandemic. So everything is shut down, closing. You can't get no birth certificate, no social security card, no anything. And could not even get the $25 from Western Union that the state gives. This is so you can't gain employment. And so House Bill 838 we did some modifications to that and sent it to a local organization, because one of the things we ran into a roadblock was aliases, an alias name. And in the state of Mississippi, if you have a married name, it's considered an alias, which means MDOC don't do anything to try to help the person on the inside get an ID if you have, quote, an alias, which is not an alias. That was a legal married name, not an alias name, but that was a legal authorized name that was still there by way of a divorce, but on the paperwork, the legislative paperwork, is classified as alias. So we wrote some modifications before the legislation recommended some modifications. I didn't do the actual writing. Technical writer form, the incarcerated lady did the writing. We submitted it. So that's one thing that we've done, is worked on that to get it in. We've also alarmed our governor and his committee that he put together to elect Burl Cain, the commissioner, on letting them know that we have 25 beds now. My husband and I run a transitional home, as Matthew introduced earlier, but we have 25 beds, and we told them we were saving those beds to give us women amid this, before the pandemic, even with the deaths, to end mass incarceration, we would take 25 women. And nothing has been done, but we've been passing out PPE, masks. We have transitional housing, of course, and we've been assisted. We've got one lady, even amid this pandemic, employed, but we've been giving out food boxes, sanitizer, cleaning supplies to the caretakers of prisoners. And of course, Matthew mentioned earlier, the Freedom Letters campaign, where we're still writing all of the people in prison just to keep them encouraged, take some of the sting out of what they're going through, to focus on, we pass out bags at least twice a month to children with an incarcerated parent, giving it to them like the incarcerated parent is sending you a happy. Just because these parents want to know about their children. And we did a graduation for 250 high school graduates, a gift. We should finish up that last 50 by this weekend, which we're in the weekend, giving that on behalf of their parent. We got an essay contest going on with 3 top prizes. The highest one being $1,000 Infinity Bash 3 7-speed bicycle with the choice of 3 helmets. We've given smoke detectors to seniors because a lot of them have been sheltered in place. And we wanted to make sure that, no fire hazards, with especially the formerly incarcerated population. And we will kick off a campaign to send cards to the fathers for Father's Day. We're doing that with the National Network for Justice that are collaborating with us on that out of Lansing, Michigan. But just trying to we partner with the National Food Chain that we will be getting some trailer trucks of food that we will be announcing next couple of days when we'll have that. But we want to make sure that we get some of this food in the Delta counties, where some of these counties have no grocery stores, and where there are no farmers, to partner with people like Senator Simmons and some other ones across the state to get food to those people. And we've also been providing disaster relief services to people that were impacted on top of this COVID-19. Well, prior to that, the flooding, then the tornadoes. And then we've been providing laundry services to seniors that have to go to the washateria, that don't have a wash and dryer at home. Cigna Healthcare has collaborated and partnered with us on that to either provide the laundry supplies and rolls of quarters, or actually provide some volunteers that volunteer with the students who we are partnered with Jackson State University, where they will go do the laundry for the senior. So that's pretty much something. That's basically a lot of what we got going on continuously.
Well, Ms. Pauline, Matthew, let me just say this, since you mentioned House Bill 838, which provides those driver's licenses for those inmates or offenders who are released. It passed the House. back in March before we suspended the session unanimously. And the bill passed the Senate Highways and Transportation Committee on Wednesday. So now that bill is on the Senate floor, and we should be taking up that bill soon. But I don't think we should have any problems with getting that bill passed and sent to the governor. So that was a really good bill.
Some language in there needed to be modified. This is it here. I will send you a copy of some of the language that deals with the alias's name and the part about the Western Union that we think needs to be in there to make the transition even smoother.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Pauline. And can you let people know if they want to help with any of your efforts at the Reach Foundation, how they can contact you, or if you have a website, can you let people know that?
Yes, www.rechfoundationms.org. Please fill out the volunteer form. We need volunteers. Of course, with this social distancing, we are doing where we would have done mass giveaways. We're doing it in sections of 50, 200 or less, and we're doing it partnering with other churches, organizations, and individuals to help us be the legs and the feet to get the product out more frequently and in areas of need. But www.rechfoundationms.org or 601-918-2970, and be paying attention to our social media sites where we will be putting up in a few days when we will have a food truck going in. We've already established one partner in Mendenhall, Mississippi, before the truck gets here, but we got to do what we can to help ourselves.
Thank you, Ms. Pauline.
Tell everybody to stay prayerful, stay safe, and stay alive.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Pauline. And so this is I guess either one of you can answer this question. We got a question from a viewer. What efforts are underway to reform? And I guess this is probably more pointed towards Senator Simmons, but what efforts are underway to reform the cash bail system in Mississippi?
All right, so there's been a lot of litigation regarding the cash bail system because, of course, it's almost like you are denying bail to individuals based upon their financial status or their income level. And so we have been fighting this through the legislature, and we had adopted the Mississippi Criminal Rules of Procedure on July the 1st, 2017. And so, 2018. And so, because of our efforts in the legislature and because the judiciary feels that a lot of matters regarding the rules and bail is a judiciary function, it was great that our judiciary came up with some rules. So really now we have a very, very specific rule 8 in our Mississippi Rules of Criminal Procedure that should govern judges, prosecutors, lawyers, and we should not be seeing some of the things that we saw prior to 2018 in Mississippi, and prior to a lot of the litigation that we saw that was pushed by the MacArthur Justice Center and Mississippi Center for Justice regarding people staying in jail off misdemeanor offenses and not being able to post out just because they're poor. So we should not be seeing that. And if you are seeing those in your communities, please give me a call at 601-359-2224 at the Capitol, or call my law firm in Greenville at 662-334-1666. And of course, you can go online and look at those other advocacy groups like Mississippi Center for Justice, MacArthur Justice Center, and even NAACP if you are seeing or experiencing those things in communities, because people should not be incarcerated, denied bail for low-level minor offenses, or giving an unreasonable bail that they can't make, because based off certain people's income, sometimes you can get a $15,000 bail, and a $15,000 bail is like $1 million bail just because of your your social economic background. So if you've seen that, then certainly report it to the lawyers in that community, and certainly those people on the front lines working to rid our state of those injustices.
Okay. I guess this is another question. Would there be a place to donate a washer or dryer? I guess this is for you, Ms. Polly.
Yes, they can contact me at 601-918-2970. Because our goal is to make things as convenient as possible for our seniors, because we don't want them, if it's just a matter that they have a hookup and no washer and dryer, we can get them a washer and dryer if that's a donation. But yes, call that number 601-918-2970.
And Senator Simmons, can you repeat those numbers one more time, please?
Yes. My district office in Greenville, 662-334-1666. And my capital office, 601-359-2224. Again, 601-359-2224. And in Greenville, 662-334-1666.
All righty. Well, I want to thank y'all for being with us today, for agreeing to be with us today. Thank you for putting up with us and some of the technical problems we had earlier. Really appreciate both of y'all. And we hope that the viewers found this conversation really informative. But we would also like to thank our Mississippi NAACP State President, Reverend James, as well as our Executive Director, Dr. Corey Wiggins, and also the Executive Director of One Voice, Mrs. Nashambi Lambright Haynes. And we'll be back for part 2 of our criminal justice conversation, same time, 4 p.m. Next Friday. So we hope that y'all will tune in next Friday as well. We'll have 2 more guests on next Friday. And tell a friend, tell a neighbor, tell a church member, spread the word. This is important information that we're trying to get out to community about what's going on in this time of uncertainty, to make sure that we're still on the front lines and doing everything that we need to do to produce transformative change inside of our state criminal justice system. So we want to thank y'all and just thank you. And that's it, everybody. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, y'all.